Fnatic has gone to MSI before, but at that time I wasn't in the roster.
This is Fnatic at their finest. We are going to Game 5. Fnatic take down SKT.
I would like to show to the fans that I can lead the team as well, just as how Yellowstar did. My goal is definitely top 2, and I would be disappointed otherwise.
I think what's next for me is just to kind of show my strength internationally, which I haven't been able to do in the last few years. I understand there's such a stigma around that. NA teams at Worlds, or like me at Worlds, I really want to break that. I really want to just completely demolish it.
Evos, they take down Supermassive.
Mình muốn là Esports thắng tất cả những vòng bảng và mình muốn bẻ răng hết những mid lane vòng bảng luôn.
Barely missed out. Oh, they're going to look for the trade. Sorta back in again. Where does Sorta come from?
今年的话 ，MSI 的队伍只有我们闪亮是从去年又再打回来，我们队伍每个人的实力，我觉得都是有所提升，所以我这次的话，想要让大家看到一个是更稳定，但是实力又更坚强的闪亮。
上一次我去 MSI 的时候是在2016年，然后现在隔了2年了，然后这次也想弥补一下当时的遗憾。
제가 이제 프레이 형이랑 오래 했지만 해외 대회에서 우승을 해본 적이 없거든요. 이제 롤드컵 같은 경우에는 준우승이 그때 독일에서 했었고 지금 저희가 MSI 일단 독일에서 시작하잖아요. 그래서 이번에는 정말 좋은 결과를 가지고 싶고 이제 꼭 세계대회 우승컵이라는 거를 정말 한번 갖고 싶다.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany, and opening day of the 2018 MSI Group Stage. The champions from 6 different regions look to put their names in the history books as we kick things off with RNG taking on the home favorites in Fnatic. Here you see them entering the studio just moments ago. That's right, we're in the EULCS studios. Beautiful. Put together, and Shocks so kindly lending her analyst desk to me for the remainder of the MSI group stages. Of course, Royal Never Give Up as well, here to do the Chinese fans proud. Hello everyone, I'm James Patterson, joined by Indiana Frosker in black, Andrew Vedius Day, and Joshua Jat Leesman. How are you guys feeling ahead of a 5-day straight group stage here for MSI?
I am extremely excited. We have so many talented teams, a bunch of new ones, and a lot of new stories to build today.
Yeah, MSI group stage might be my favorite group stage. It's so many games for so many teams. Every team plays 10 games. There's always a pretty large amount of upsets, which is always pretty exciting.
I'm actually going to go one further. MSI is actually my favorite tournament. I feel like it's Worlds, but without all of the fat trimmed away, so it's just lean competition of champions.
All right, well, covering the action from around the world, we do have our international broadcast partners. Here you see them on your screen. This is just half of them, as we'll flip to the other half in just a moment's time. About 22 different regions being cast around the world to help bring the action to everyone on every corner of the globe. Now, before we look into a closer look at the champions and competitors, let's remind everyone here of the format at MSI 2018. Now, in the group stage, each team will play 10 games, with the top 4 teams advancing to the knockout stage. The semifinal matchups will be determined by the choice of the top seed before our MSI champions are decided on the 20th of May.
Yeah, and a couple things to point out. The current champions of MSI, or SKT, they're not here. They didn't win the LCK. We actually only have one returning team to the MSI group stage from last year, and that's the Flash Wolves. So a lot different this year at MSI.
Yeah, a lot of new teams. We don't have the likes of an SKT, no G2 from Europe, no TSM or CLG from NA, no EDG from China. So very much a new look for this year's MSI.
It's just a new chapter in general for League of Legends esports. Yes, you still have all of these legacy names, but also some familiar or new faces joining the roster, and a new MSI champion will be crowned.
That, of course, brings us to our competitors, starting starting with EVOS Esports from the VCS and Flash Wolves from the LMS, who won the play-in stage after taking down Supermassive and Gambit.
And they did it in quite a dominating way as well. The fact that we had a 3-1 going in favor of EVOS and a 3-0 going in favor of the Flash Wolves. I feel like many analysts kind of expected there to be a little bit more competition from the play-in teams, but these guys came in with pre-prepared strategies and they played perfect.
Yeah, I mean, the play-in group stage was pretty exciting. You saw Supermassive was dominating. You saw Gambit seem to be a little bit back in form, and then nope, they just got slammed by EVOS and Flash Wolves here. So I liked seeing EVOS kind of bringing a little bit of what the Gigabyte Marines did in terms of game pace into it, and two of their players, and I also liked what Flash Wolves did as well.
And fortunately, there was just a lot of pressure. You know, Vietnam getting their spot on the world stage now, having their region behind them. The Flash Wolves also bringing in two new members of the Wolfpack and needing to really cement their legacy that were something without just Karsa.
Well, I think that's the big thing, right? A lot of questions surrounded the Flash Wolves squad and what their identity would be without Karsa. But you have to remember, they still have the likes of Sword Art and Maple.
Yeah, I was expecting a weaker version of Flash Wolves, honestly, without Karsa, because he was such a big part of that team. And that still could be the case, but the fact that they were so convincing in that play-in knockout stage portion with the 3-0 makes me think they're still a threat.
They also only have 2 rookies, right? The fact that they came into their first international stage after their first split, I feel like not only will they have a lot to learn, but a lot of surprises, I imagine, they will bring.
They'll, of course, be joining Kingzone, Dragon X, Royal, Never Give Up, Fnatic, and Team Liquid in the group stage. Let's start by looking at Kingzone from the LCK, a team considered by many to be the favorites going into this tournament.
Yeah, they're 2-time champions of the LCK now, winning the last 2 splits. They were really the favorites going into Worlds last year under the title of Longzhu, and Praying Gorilla in particular have actually come into a couple of tournaments as Korea's sole representative and not won. So even though there is this expectation that they will win, there is still that pressure of being Korea's lone team to win. Huge favorites, though, based on how they dominate Korea and how Korea is so strong in MSI.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't seen this team before, I mean, the reason why they're favorites is because they're pretty good at League of Legends. Their early game was one of the most dominant in the LCK regular season, and to top it all off, their team fighting is just phenomenal. The individual skill on this roster is just seems unparalleled.
Would expect nothing less from the most dominant team in the most dominant of regions. Moving right along, though, we have the LPL's RNG with their superstar AD carry in Uzi making his first MSI appearance.
And he's not the only superstar on that team. RNG, one of 2 super teams throughout the LPL, and Uzi, after so many second-place finishes, finally got to lift the cup, and that's what you want to see as an LPL fan going into this. Not just an in-form Uzi, but an Uzi with momentum.
Yeah, and I feel Uzi finally playing the way that he's always really wanted to, but sometimes his teammates weren't willing to give to him. I saw Xiaohu, their mid laner, playing Banner of Command, Ardent Sensor, Morgana in the mid lane.
Please no.
And Karma being the highest priority mid laner for them before it became super meta like we've seen in this play. And so everyone on that team is supporting Uzi almost more than they ever have. And guess what? It's the first split Uzi's won in the LPL.
It's working. That's the core of that statement there. We have from the EU LCS, of course, Fnatic coming off a huge win over the 4-time defending champions in G2 Esports.
Yep, the old kings have reclaimed their throne, and after what was a long rebuilding process, after losing Huni and Rainova, they finally managed to find some success. They brought Youngbuck, G2's former coach, onto the roster, along with Hillisang down in the support position, and they just blew away the competition. No other AD could really rival the power that Reckless could bring in the bottom lane.
And for me, I'm frankly most excited to see Fnatic on the international stage. I felt like they were a bit of a rose in the greenhouse, and so I really want to know, like you're saying, can they still walk away with the success they've had built off of Caps and Reckless, or will they simply not be able to just frankly outclass their opponents and slow them down?
Now, finally, we have Team Liquid from the North American LCS. Tons of experience on this roster, Jet.
Yeah, a team of veterans, new team for them, and they actually had a pretty shaky regular season going 12-8, including tiebreakers, but it was in the playoffs where they really found their form, Doublelift in particular. And now the question will be whether they can take that playoff momentum onto the international stage and carry through, or if some of their struggles from the middle of the regular season come back against this different competition here at MSI.
It's easy to forget the struggles of that regular season when you look at the 9-1 record and the way they kind of dominated the North American playoffs.
One of the big things for me is how well prepared Team Liquid tend to be when coming into things like playoffs. I feel like that regular season performance to their playoffs was just so different that my expectations are actually quite high for this roster, and I'm looking forward to having them have a strong start.
Of course, we have a stacked AD carry pool in the group stage with some famous names like Uzi, Reckless, Doublelift, and Prey. So let's go ahead and run through these guys, starting with Team Liquid's Doublelift, who's still looking to find success on the international stage.
Yeah, and I really want him to have a good international tournament because this guy is unquestionably a legend in North America, winning with 3 different organizations, but making it out of groups would be huge for him. It's something he just hasn't done on the international stage, so a big moment for him to really prove himself once again.
And ultimately, I feel like Doublelift's legacy, at least domestically, has been cemented. He is unquestionably one of the greatest players that North America has ever put out.
We say that, but every time he fails internationally, sure enough, the comments come back, is Doublelift ever good? It's just easy over there, but it needs to happen internationally.
And the best part about this tournament is that if he does throw down the gauntlet, no one can question him ever because of the caliber of talent that he's sharing the company with.
Right, not in this meta, not with the ADCs that he'll be going up against. Now up next, we've got Kingzone's Prey, who's been a big part of their back-to-back LCK wins.
Now this guy, he's been around for a very long time, but he himself is yet to secure himself an international title, but this could be his best chance. You've always got a couple of question marks because very similarly to Worlds, he was on the team that was favorited to win the entire tournament. And while they initially looked good, things did not work out as the tournament progressed, but they've made a few changes to their roster, and their ability to play through this bot lane and just enable them is what fascinates me so much, because they don't put a huge amount of resources into him, Chad.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. It's the biggest difference about putting the resources into Prey.
Yeah, so many, if you think about top laners, you think, oh, the carry style or the tank style, and very few can kind of play both. But AD carries, it's almost even more rare to have the guy who is resource heavy or very resource light, but still have a large output into the game. We saw during the LCK finals, Prey was actually resource heavy, and they played it well. But based on that stat, 10th in the LCK in gold percentage for his team means he's a very resource light AD carry often, and that just kind of shows you how good he can be.
We'll see how Kingzone deals with the pressure of being the sole representative from Korea. Of course, Peanut on that team, the only defending champion here at MSI. Moving right along, though, to Fnatic's Reckless. Now, this is a guy who had a monumental performance in the ULCS finals.
And the thing is, for Reckless, is after Sven departed from Europe, it felt like that there were a few new AD carries to come in challenging, but no one really could. And he just created such a big gap between him and the rest of the competition. You can see that he sat atop the ratings for so many different stats. This guy was so dominant in his role that for the most part of the season, this team just enabled him and he ran away with it.
And Fnatic's entire style is built around the team fight, and it's getting behind a guy like Reckless. Yes, he does have Caps as kind of that secondary threat towards the team, but really everything, all eyes are going to be on Reckless for the team's success.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing how Reckless does against this crop of AD carries, because in the European LCS, before Sven left for North America, he was thinking there was this big rivalry between him and Sven.
Right.
But as kind of Frost mentioned, the Rose in the Greenhouse, he was unchallenged for a lot of the things he was doing in the European LCS. That changes at MSI here. He doesn't get a free laning phase.
Right.
All these guys are amazing in lane, and they're also equally good in team fights. So if he can excel above these guys as well, that's where he really makes the statement.
Right. How will he deal with not getting as many free advantages, let's say, as he would have domestically? Finally, we got to take a look at RNG's Uzi, looking to prove himself as the best AD carry in the world.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Plenty of professional players, ADCs, have come out and said that Uzi is the guy to beat. And if you haven't seen Uzi play, it's just because how dominating he is. He can test you for every single CS. He loves to build up those gold leads. Highest gold lead at 15 of any of ADCs in the position. And he is just a monster in the bot lane.
And I just love watching this guy play team fights. His positioning and decision-making is just unquestionable. And he is just so amazing to watch. Like, his talents just feel unrivaled.
Yeah, and there's not a coincidence that these 4 amazing AD carries are on the 4 teams that won their region. AD carry is so important in the current game right now. There's a lot of items that can enhance the AD carry, like the Zeeks. There's some incredibly strong AD carries in the meta. Supports are super strong, so the success of bot lane is important. So the best AD carries tend to win. So that role, I think, is the most important role at the tournament.
And it makes it all that much more interesting that none of those 4 AD carries have ever been to MSI before, so they have not dealt with the pressure of this international tournament. We'll get our first look at these AD carries in just a few minutes, though, as Reckless and Fnatic Fnatic face off against Uzi's RNG. After that, we'll have a clash between two of our play-in teams, Flash Wolves and EVOS, before Kingzone step on stage for their game against Team Liquid.
I personally am really looking forward to that final game of the day, RNG versus Kingzone. Many analysts off the bat are saying that it will be the LPL that will be able to rival LCK, and I want to see how well they will stack against each other.
Jumping 5 hours ahead. Yeah, come on, man. We got a lot of exciting games before that.
That's what I'm most excited for. There's a lot of build-up before that, all right?
3 hours ahead or 4 hours ahead, because game 4 and 5 to me are super intriguing. A lot of times you see, hey, the EU and NALCS were preceded into group stage. Does that mean they're stronger than the two teams that made it out of play-in? Not necessarily. So the West, so to speak, has some proving to do in those two games.
All right, well, there you have it. First up, Fnatic will get their chance for revenge as they face off against the team that ended their Worlds run in RNG.
Yeah, it was a tough loss when they ran into each other into the quarterfinals, but ultimately, Fnatic get to look for redemption here, and RNG also get to look for a bit of redemption. Yes, they came into MSI in 2016. That was the era, the rise of RNG, but since then, they've had their Worlds run, but they haven't gotten another shot at an MSI title.
Yeah, and now, this time, it is RNG playing on Fnatic's home turf. Last time around, they did say that it was quite daunting playing in such a huge crowd, and while the atmosphere might be slightly different with not many thousands of fans cheering in front of your face, you can feel the pressure will definitely be on RNG, as Fnatic will be in their studio playing on their home turf.
Well, we talk about the importance of AD carries in this meta and in this tournament. How do these two teams differ in the way that they play around these ADCs? Where will they look to get them advantages and ultimately allow them to carry them through to a victory?
Yeah, so a lot of times, when I watched Fnatic play in the European LCS, they would sometimes pick disadvantaged lanes because they were so confident in their ability to reach team fights. I don't necessarily think that can work against RNG, because when I look at Uzi and Xiaohu, their opponents actually average very low CS against them compared to everyone else in the tournament. So those two laners, Xiaohu and Uzi, are great at denying enemy CS, which means they're very aggressive at contesting in lanes. So Fnatic will have to pick a little bit more up-tempo, at least in the lane.
Frost?
I would never debate that type of point. I do agree. I think Fnatic do need to speed it up. We saw it a little bit in their Vitality series, when Broxah went towards the Nidalee pick. But ultimately, I do think that there's also a lot of hubris to RNG, where they also try to take unfavorable matchups. The Kog'Maw and the Rakan lane comes to mind. And I don't necessarily think that Fnatic playing a slower pace game in terms of starting from draft will be heavily punished if RNG decide to fumble draft phase.
I mean, I know we've seen a lot of Fnatic playing slower games during the regular season, but I feel that coming into this tournament, they're going to up the tempo just a little bit.
So.
When you compare the two junglers, I feel like MLXG is a bit of a wild card, and you have to be able to match the unpredictability that he always brings to a game. And I feel like Broxah has a good awareness of what to do during the laning phase to play towards his bottom lane, enable them, and really set up Reckless to be the big carry of this game.
See, for me, though, that's the big breaking point in this matchup. It's Broxah versus MLXG, because ultimately, we say Fnatic, they're a team fighting team. Well, guess what? RNG come from the region of team fighters. They faced 100 Fnatics. EDG and Fnatic, I feel, are fairly similar, and RNG took them down quite handily in the finals. But Fnatic don't have any experience with a jungler like MLXG.
A few minutes ahead of game time, I'm going to give you guys the chance to steal the spotlight here every once in a while with our predictions. Of course, Frost and Jat will be on the desk with us throughout the tournament. Vedius, our guest here on day one. Very surprisingly, I might say, 2 votes for Fnatic here.
What are you
against
doing,
Royal
Benny?
Never
What
Give
are you
Up.
doing,
Pandering to the EU crowd.
Of course I am. This is
Classic
my
EU
region.
analyst.
We've never seen either of these teams play. This is like my only chance to confidently go in and say that Fnatic's going to win.
Explain yourselves.
So I feel,
Yes, please.
I feel, right, there are 2 things that I think will give Fnatic the big edge in this matchup. Number one, I think Broxah is a more consistent and stable jungler in MLXG who is super gank heavy.
But did you watch his playoffs? MLXG is on fire. He's in his
This
best
ain't
form.
the LPL playoffs.
This is the LPL playoffs. And I feel like that when I watch MLXG, he reminds me a lot of Gilius and the amount of playstyle that he has.
You did not.
Yes, I did. Right? And I feel like Fnatic are going to look to be able to control it. The second main point is when I watch Xiaohu, he is super aggressive in lane. He tries really hard to win it. And I just have that much confidence in Caps that he will be able to manage Xiaohu and he will be able to win that lane.
You mean the guy that solo dies in like pretty much every single game? Yes, Caps can go off. He can be a rocket shooting from the hip, but he ultimately it's a double-edged sword. He can also cost you a game.
Jad, I'll give you the final word here.
All right. I think the first game of a tournament is always pretty volatile.
Okay.
Fnatic has been here. This is their home turf. These teams have not scrimmed each other. RNG got here 23.5 hours ago, played a few scrims last night, and then came to the studio today. If there was a time for Fnatic to take down RNG, it's before they found out the tournament meta. It's before. Fnatic's been scrimming with a lot of teams that have been in MSI, that have been playing competitive games on 8.8. I don't think the same is true for RNG, so I think RNG will probably end higher than Fnatic, but here I think Fnatic can steal one.
There you have it. Predictions for the first 3 games of the day. We'll get the other 3 later on. We'll soon find out which predictions will come true. For now, it's time to head down to the casters to kick off today's games. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Dash, and hello, everybody. Welcome to Berlin, and starting on the blue side, we have the EU LCS champions, Fnatic. In the top lane, Buipo. Jungle, Broxah. Mid lane, Caps. AD carry, Reckless. Support, Hillisang. Coach, Dylan Falco. And substitute top laner, Soaz. Their opponents from the LPL, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome RNG. In the top lane, Let Me. In the jungle, MLXG. In the mid lane, Xiaohu. ADC, Uzi. Support, Ming. And their coach, Hart. Substitute jungler, Karsa. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the opening group stage game, Fnatic versus RNG. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Trevor Quickshow Henry, joined at the caster desk by Isaac Azel, Cummings Bentley, and Martin DeFisciolung. And gentlemen, we have to say it, we're just all so excited to start MSI, are we not?
Of course we are
Very
excited. Now we've all said it, we don't need to say excited anymore. I just wanted to see this game now.
The problem is the anticipation is what's killing me. What level are we going to see from all of the teams? We get to cast the first 3 games together. We get to actually see them face off against one another on 8.8.
Yeah, and I mean, these first games can be so incredibly important because everyone has Kingzone as this heavy favorite, but then it seems like much more of a mix of teams that could be finishing in those higher spots and fighting against them. And we have to see, is it Fnatic that is going to be kind of rising to the top, or is it RNG?
Yeah, we also always see a lot of interesting pick and ban phase on day 1. A lot of changes suddenly for day 2 and day 3. And the team has kind of figured out from the start what the correct champions to play are. They always get an early advantage. And we have to see with Fnatic, and all the time they've been practicing now on patch 8.8 against some of the teams here at MSI, if they can actually get an advantage.
I think it's so important you mentioned that. Day 1, day 2, day 3. There's no week 2. There's no
it's just
real time to digest 5 group stage days in a row, 6 games per day, and each team has no wiggle room, no room for error. So what are you expecting to see now coming straight out the gates?
I mean, I think there's going to be a very high priority on getting these winning bottom lanes. The people are playing so heavily around the bottom side of the map. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Kai'Sa picks, but we're going to see a lot of Kai'Sa bans. And I do think that we're going to see probably a lot of priority on winning lanes, on pushing lanes, because that seems to be where most of these teams kind of are focused.
Yeah, and we're heading into a tournament where we're going to get a lot of flex picks. Suddenly, you know, top lane, you can get things like Swain and Ryze and Vladimir. They can also all go to the mid lane, just to mention those ones specifically, and also down that support role. I feel like almost everything is viable right now. You can play these range supports, the squishy ones, then you can try and counter them with hard engaged supports, and we're going to see a lot of different things, and it comes down to execution all of a sudden.
Well, execution is one thing, and that's something we'll have to see how the teams, how they perform today. Players are just about ready for picks and bans. Let's actually go on record now. Let's look into the crystal ball. We've seen a bunch of play-in games. We've seen 8.8 over the last 2 weeks. Azael, where do you think they should start? You've already mentioned the Kai'Sa. Let's move into the slightly more specific Fnatic and RNG type picks. What would you anticipate?
I mean, it's really hard to say exactly what kind of a style they're going to be playing. I do think that, you know, jungle is going to be fairly high priority as well. There's been a really huge focus on Trundle. And one of the things that's going to be interesting to me is Trundle is so big. Are people going to be practicing picks that actually are strong into the Trundle? We saw in play-ins, Graves can work quite well into it. You know, as far as solo queue picks, Nidalee is considered very strong in the Trundle. So I'm going to be very excited to see kind of how the jungle meta is changing.
Yeah, and I also want to see if we just get a bunch of tanks up in the top lane, or if we have teams trying to run these mages or some other carries trying to counter the tanks. Mid lane as well. Karma is going to be one of the big picks. She's already taken away by Fnatic early on, but a lot of other supportive mids can be locked in to just buff up that AD carry in the late game. Morgana, of course, being one of them. Maybe a Lulu.
Well. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because there are so many AP picks which in isolation in their lane seem to work very well, but Banner can be such a problem for those champions.
Well, it can indeed, and straight out the gate, those supportive champions we talked about, Jens, Karma gone, Morgana gone, Gangplank and Swain. I definitely think RNG have looked at Whippo's match history in his 7 professional games. Played both of those.
Of course, Whippo likes to play Sion if it is available. Very safe choice for him. Ornn is going to be another pick, and I think there's a lot of eyes on this rookie up in that top lane. And yes, he's an EU champion now, but he's only played, as you highlight, Trevor, such a few amount of games, and he got thrown into playoffs due to the injury that Source, of course, got back a month ago.
And such an incredible amount of focus here from Fnatic on banning out, yes, these could be mids or supports, but really, things to enable Uzi in this bottom lane. They have seen how incredible of a run he had, throughout the season, but especially in playoffs. He was an absolute monster for RNG, and they played so heavily around him, as Jat was saying.
Gentlemen, Kai'Sa is available and open. Is it blind pick, first pick worthy?
Yes.
Yes. Also because you're against Uzi and you cannot give Uzi Kai'Sa.
Look, just a reminder, of course, it's Reckless versus Uzi. A lot of the fans here in Berlin will remember the Reckless pentakill as it happened, just a few weeks ago.
Also worth highlighting, though, Europe did not play on a patch where Kai'Sa was available in playoffs. This is the first time we get to see Reckless played on the professional stage. On the other side, with RNG, they got to play against it, and they got to play it themselves, so they know exactly what's going to happen now.
And Kog'Maw coming out here from Uzi very quickly. We're interested to see what's drafted alongside that. I know a lot of people have kind of had questions sometimes about the LPL's drafting, specifically RNG's drafting. There was a playoff game kind of drafting this Rakan plus Kog'Maw combo that was kind of questioned quite a bit as not having enough support for that Kog'Maw to get him through the laning phase. So I'm really interested to see what support they're actually going to try to pair with it.
I mean, we've seen again, as you highlight, the aggressive ones, they can still counterpick for Ming if they want to and just get a range support with him. They just love to put him in that mid lane. Once we get past the laning phase, he just sits there with long range and he tries to clear the wave and farm everything. I want to look at the Olaf though specifically because I'm happy RNG start MLXG. I think he's the correct kind of jungler against a team like Fnatic. Because MLXG, he's extremely active. He kind of plays for himself. He takes a few chances, but he forces plays on you. And we have seen Fnatic during the split kind of struggle against the very fast and aggressive junglers.
Yeah, and while I think Trundle is the obvious answer, Trundle does very well against Olaf later in the game. The early game, you can be kind of dominated by this Olaf who has more presence, who has more pressure, and who can get in your face.
Well, we'll see what MLXG decides to do, which lanes he tries to prioritize or play around. Phase 1 for Fnatic locked in. It will be the Braum, Kai'Sa. And we'll see what RNG lock in. And of course, gentlemen, Reckless wasn't the only guy that got pentakills. I do have a clip prepared of Uzi's pentakill, and we'll see what sort of support he's going to get. This was, of course, Uzi's Kai'Sa. That was game-changing throughout the course of the playoff bracket, and RNG really ran it down. We'll get back to that in a moment because Ryze has been locked in.
The best champion for Xiaohu, a champion where he can go to the side lane, he becomes a split pusher, but also he can actually use the Ryze ulti to roam down towards the bottom lane if he wants to make a play around Uzi specifically. So this is his go-to pick.
One of the things that is kind of nice for this, though, for Fnatic is the fact that Caps has been such a strong carry for them throughout the split, and he's going to have the opportunity to try to counterpick mid. Of course, RNG can somewhat protect Xiaohu in the picks and bans, but if something like a Cassio was still available, that can be a pretty strong matchup into the Ryze and maybe a way in there for Fnatic.
Let's see what they decide to do. Really taking their time in this first pick ban. Shen will be the target, removing that from Let Me In. Removing one of those tanky top laners.
Yeah, and I think also Shen will be one of the picks we have to look at a lot during this tournament because we talk about playing around the bottom lane. Obviously, Global's coming from that top side. GP being another one that was banned much earlier in this game here. So Whippo's losing a lot of top lane choices. And especially Ornn and Sion, I figured would be his go-to champions if they were available. Because I think Fnatic prefer to have him on a tank and not put too much carry pressure on him. But he might have to actually step up here.
Yeah, it is kind of scary for a guy to be seeing, the only champions you've really ever played in competitive banned away. This is a rookie player on the international stage going up against one of the most legendary teams in League of Legends history, and you don't get to warm up. You have to be performing from the word go.
On the bright side, the one other champion he has played is available, the Cho'Gath. We've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
It has shown a lot of appearances. Maokai's still up and available as well. Tahm Kench will be the support, so really going in there for RNG.
And if you look at Fnatic, and let's let's pretend they go for Cho'Gath. They're running with very, very low amounts of engage in this composition, and they are against Uzi on a late game hyper carry where he can destroy their front line. Reckless will have to try and match it on the Kai'Sa, which is definitely possible because the late game damage with the passive is absolutely insane as well. But it is a Fnatic team that's currently not running with a lot of ways to start fights.
And RNG is very clearly trying. Oh, is they're going to get the Yasuo for Caps?
That's locked in.
Yeah.
He's been spamming this champion in solo queue so many times. I've been watching him play, and he just goes completely off. He is so mechanically gifted, and he's so good at executing this specific champion. Will they just go Cho'Gath for a knock-up, and then they can time the Q with the Yasuo ult?
They certainly could. I mean, Cho'Gath is kind of the most safe pick here, perhaps, for Bwipo, but the thing is, RNG has been targeting him throughout the entire draft. They are setting up for the counter pick top. It's actually going to be a Vladimir here, perhaps worried about the Vladimir into the Cho matchup or something along those lines, but there's potential for Lemmy to play, aggressive fighters, things even, like Kled and Camille and these sorts of picks. If you can focus that top laner, you can put Vladimir way too far behind.
Oh, I'm so nervous about this Yasuo pick into the Rise.
He's the one European player where I'm not nervous just because I've seen him do so well on it. Cho'Gath, of course, is a good matchup against Vladimir because you can just kind of push him in and he can never kill you, and it gets really difficult for Bwipo in that case, but he wants to just try and scale himself. Like, this Yasuo pick, it just changes everything, because no matter what the draft looks like, if he gets ahead in the early game and he starts running to a side lane and just kills everyone, like, he becomes the man to look at.
And theoretically, it still could be Yasuo top. I'm really not expecting it, but this is, a possibility of a flex pick, and we did talk a lot about the ability to surprise teams on day one, coming into a tournament, having the edge as far as, the pick ban and what people are or are not expecting, but you still have to then be able to execute on it.
Yes, and that's what we need to look at. Obviously, we had that swap potential, but it was a fairly anticipated draft with the exception of that Yasuo. That's the one that really caught me off guard into the Rise. All the pressure on Fnatic's shoulders in their home studio on home turf, taking on Royal Never Give Up.
And it's worth highlighting, RNG, it's pure comfort on their side. Like, most played AD carry, most played support with Tahm Kench, and you have the Rise for Xiaohu, his best champion as well. So they're gonna look at this and say, we got everything we needed for this draft. It's Fnatic trying to do something crazy.
Something also that's pretty cool about this draft is you're saying, okay, well, Cho'Gath into Vladimir, yes, you're going to rush a banner. That's going to be pretty frustrating, but you can actually rotate your Yasuo into the side lane, have him laning against the Cho'Gath, and he can deal with that banner minion very easily. So they do have some plans for that, and Vladimir can then lane up against Rise fairly well here too. So I think this is a very well thought out draft, but execution is going to be the name of the game. We have to see how these teams are going to perform.
Oh man, the theory crafting hats, everybody's happy with it. Let's see how they pull this off. Will Fnatic or Royal Never Give Up strike first in the mid-season Invitational group stage? You guys know how to vote. Go jump on Twitter and throw up those hashtags. Let's see who's gonna do it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's kick off Fnatic versus RNG. Let's take a look.
Look at level 1 here. They're expecting RNG maybe to move in and place an early ward, or is it Fnatic on their side? Ming will be able to spot them.
It's not the first time that we've seen Fnatic do some shenanigans at level 1. They have been creative at times.
Definitely.
Over the past few months of play.
I lost to level 1.
And I think it's very intelligent, especially when you have a champion like Braum, who's so ridiculously strong at level 1. You group up, you poke, you prod, you try to look for something, and if it's not there, there's so little cost. But if you can get a summoner, if you can get a level 1 kill, that can sometimes change the course of a game.
And we definitely also in this game we now need to look around the mid lane. There's a Yasuo. That obviously makes it pretty easy to say, let's target that lane. Yes, that's going to be important in terms of Caps getting off to a good start, rushing that PD as fast as possible, but mainly just with MLXG and Olaf, and then Xiaohu's Rise. Like, these two guys are very good at playing together when it comes to shutting down an enemy mid laner, and when you are against a champion that effectively needs to snowball, it looks like that's the obvious lane for MLXG to play around.
And then we just need to keep track of where he is. At the moment, top half start for both respective junglers. And looking down the summoner spells, no huge surprises. Conqueror there on Yasuo, all the new additions. Which one of these junglers will be able to make that first move? We've already talked about the stylistic differences between Broxah and MLXG. Has Broxah done enough homework to really anticipate what MLHG could do?
I mean, I think what Broxa has to do is try to be in position for counter ganks. I don't think you get to make the first move really in the Trundle versus Olaf early game. MLXG, just due to the nature of the champion, is going to be able to have the initiative there. So that is, it's going to be more about positioning and being in the right place at the right time for Broxa.
Yeah, and he's important to actually prevent any of these lanes from falling further behind, because just based on the champions, RNG will have to push in effectively every single lane early on. If they then also ends up dying to a gank from MLXG and fall even further behind, it becomes almost impossible to play the game. So for now, Fnatic are accepting that they don't really have a lane that can necessarily just push in RNG, and they have to just sit back and farm whatever they can.
The interesting thing is, though, if Fnatic can keep this even, they are a very magic-heavy team. When you're looking at the carries, you know, you have a Cho'Gath, you have a Ryze, you have Uzi on this Kog'Maw. That's so much magic damage, and things like an adaptive can become so important and so powerful for Broxa.
So I have to remember, RNG just arrived to Berlin yesterday. Yeah, obviously flew over from China after they managed to win the LPL split in surprising fashion, which is weird to say if you don't follow the LPL and you just watched RNG play at Worlds, you know, get top 4. Of course, they're one of the best teams then, but they came into playoffs in China not as a favorite at all.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, they had to beat WE, IG, EDG, Snake, and it was IG really who was this massive favorite. RNG battled the whole way through the playoffs. Uzi winning his first ever championship, making his first appearance at MSI, and still chasing that international championship.
I mean, that championship was definitely on Uzi's back. The team funneled so many resources into him, something that we see a lot. We'll talk on that in just a moment, as MLXG may have an opportunity now. Gonna move in with that Predator, sidestep by Whipper into the Sanguine pool. Takes a lot of damage, potential dive on the cards, but not gonna commit further, no summoner spells used either.
Oh, the young Rookie keeping it very cool there, not just flashing away instantly. And suddenly it's MLXG with the first gank. Broxa is still farming on the bottom side.
And one of the things that actually makes that more impactful than it sometimes looks is the fact of where the minion wave is. It was actually stacked near his opponent's turret, so this means Whippo has to TP back to actually be able to shove it in and reset that wave, or he will start to kind of bleed out that farm, which makes you more vulnerable to repeat ganks.
Luckily for Whippo, MLXG did not just go straight back to the top lane. Bot lane here, this is something that happens pretty often for Fnatic. Reckless will go back early, and then Hylissang stays in the lane and try and hold the wave for his AD carry. Sadly for him, Ming and Uzi, they've seen it before. They just force him onto the turret. Reckless is back in lane though, and now it is time for RNG to go back to base.
Well, listen, Uzi on Kog'Maw, Reckless on Kai'Sa. We'll talk about that in a moment in case there's any follow-up. Let's take a look at the head-to-head matchup, of course, because that could be the game-changing play. Look at the CSD at 15, 13 for Uzi, but the gold percentage is very, very high.
Ooh, let's see around mid first.
Let's take a look. Xiaohu gonna force the flash already, gets chomped on by Broxa, but advantage Fnatic with a successful game.
Yeah, really nicely done, and that's no TP actually on Xiaohu, so getting him low there could force him back to base. And I mean, Uzi's laning phase is legendary. You see that represented in the stats. That CS advantage at 15 is almost unheard of, and you know, even this early on, he is kind of developing that CS advantage, and is going to be fairly up on Reckless as he collects all the farm that's pushing towards him.
For now, it is just about the farming, because none of the teams have been able to actually kill each other. And if you look at the lanes, like bot lane, it's kind of difficult to actually secure a kill against these two very defensive melee supports and 280 carries that effectively just looking to get the Rage Blade completed as the first item before they really want to fight too much. And that's why we saw MLXG try topside, and of course Broxa trying to get caps going in mid, which is something we really want to see from Fnatic, because we know that they cannot play this style they played back in Europe, where they fell behind in a lot of their games, 2,000 to 3,000 gold. Here on the international stage, they need a more impactful early game, and so far it's fairly even.
Yeah, it is indeed. I mean, CS advantage for Let Me in the top lane, plus 10 for now. It's even as far as the other carries are concerned. We'll keep our eyes on how that continues to play out. But RNG definitely feeling pretty comfortable in the first opening game, but as we've mentioned, it comes down to this execution of Fnatic comp, how they enable this Yasuo, which is such a feast or famine champion, and more often famine on this stage.
Definitely the case, man. While RNG is looking fairly comfortable, you have to say Fnatic's early game has gone pretty well when you take into consideration the early jungle advantage should be on the other side. The fact that Broxa, you know, is a little bit ahead in farm, has kind of matched the pressure of MLXG. MLXG has no real big advantages. You know, as you hit level 6, Trundle can start to really kind of 1v1 and match that pressure.
Well, Trundle's going to try a 2v2 for now. Caps has already used that Steel Tempest, was rooted in place. Going to be able to chase down Xiaohu, and she's the jungler's wave. They say hello to one another. MLXG's not done. I'm looking at the mini-map. There is some wards in the blue buff of Fnatic. This is RNG's wards, rather. Now they're going to start to back away. This could get hairy.
Well, this is the focus we talked about around the mid lane, but MLXG is now walking into an ocean of control wards placed by Fnatic to try and track him. Broxer decides not to fight it and will have to give up because the mid lane is, I believe, currently just slightly in favor of Xiaohu in terms of minions. MLXG wants to contest, though.
Broxer realizes he stood right on top of that control ward, so to clear it out. Of course, we're on Fnatic Vision as RNG. We're trying to move in. Now, Xiaohu's pushed Caps back, continues to stick around. Smite fight is on the cards here. Trundle Pillar comes down, and MLXG steals the Sentinel away.
Yeah, Brox's just going to give it up. I mean, you can see Xiaohu was making the first move. He is post 6 on Rise, could join with that ultimate more quickly than Caps, who was chunked out a little bit under his turret, and that's going to be the difference there. If your mid lane is pushing, you can contest that. When it's not, he has to play safe.
We also see around the bottom lane, Uzi and Ming just constantly pushing down to this turret here. 50% HP. At this point here, the ulti you just talked about before here, Zil, from Xiaohu can be used down to this bottom side to threaten a potential tower dive. And RNG are controlling this bottom side very well, and it's hard to gank this lane for Broxer, especially because Kaiser's early damage is not that insane. So Reckless just needs more time, but he's currently losing the matchup.
And I do think that RNG has just done such a good job of placing deep vision. You can see that there was actually a ward on the red buff. There's a ward over the dragon wall there as well. You know, they had the pink ward on the blue buff, so they have really been tracking Broxer here also. And you know, as Trundle, if you're spotted, your ganks really just aren't going to happen. Your gank consists really of walking up and dropping a pillar and kind of hoping you can chase them down.
Not exactly the most exciting. No. But of course, we'll see whether or not Broxer and Caps can actually combo, use their pillar and last breath a little later in the game. As we're approaching 10 minutes, it's nearly 1,000 gold advantage for RNG, and it's just incremental. Look at the CSE in the top, plus 20, plus 10 in the mid lane, plus 6 in the bottom. It just, all of those little inches add up.
Yeah, it's just a lot of things about the matchups as we talked about with top and bot lane pushing and winning for RNG. So not only are the champions in their favor, but also just the way they're executing the early laning phase. The only good thing for Fnatic is the fact that MLXG has not been able to secure an early kill on someone like Caps. He is staying somewhat even in this lane here, but of course he has to concede some of the CS on the Yasuo.
Yeah, it's interesting to see just how defensive Xiaohu is actually going, like rushing Ninja Tabbies here, you know, against this team, even with a Vladimir and some magic damage there as well. But obviously pretty concerned about the immense amount of auto attack damage that can come out both from Yasuo as well as the Kaiser.
Yeah, also the Trundle if he's around mid, and if there is a skirmish between junglers and mid laners, that Ninja Tabby could be useful. He might get one.
Find out, insta cleanse into the last breath. Some damage down into Xiaohu, but it's Caps that's falling low. Teleport, no, it was Ming that came in with the Abyssal Void.
Reckless is here.
To get the gobble down onto MLXG. Oh, Reckless jumps in with a killer instinct, tries to throw down some Macathian Rain. Nobody's died yet, and nobody will die for a moment.
Fnatic loves to set up plays when Hylissang can move from base towards the mid lane. That's why they start this fight here. They know they can try and get 1 or 2 kills, but instead it is RNG quickly disengaging, so good call from them.
Yeah, well played, honestly, by both sides. Hylissang, good on him to be able to match the roam from that Tahm Kench ultimate. You know, Ming was very quick to arrive to that mid lane, but Hylissang was already on the roam, and you know, both teams do disengage, but some summoners at least have to be popped on the RNG side.
You just feel the tension continuing to build. Opening game of MSI group stage here. Europe taking on China. Of course, just a reminder, this was the quarterfinal matchup from Worlds, which RNG ended up taking 3-1. And they're fending off this early game pretty well. Azale, you mentioned some of those summoner spells. Ming, Xiaohu, and Let Me all missing their flashes.
Yeah.
But Let Me and Xiaohu have got the teleports at least.
MLXG as well. I mean, that's 4 flashes down, and it's interesting to see. You know, Let Me obviously had that flash forced in a 1v1 scenario. I'm not sure if that was used to actually, cancel a TP or at risk of a solo kill or something like that. But Woodbow certainly holding his own up in the top side. And I'm going to be interested to track the Vladimir build. In the LPL, you see a lot of the Shurelias into CDR boots. They grab a Phoenix Codex and they run straight towards that death cap and not actually completing a Zhonia. So I'm going to be interested to find his interpretation on it.
We also saw Spellbinder from GBM in play-ins, obviously with very mixed success if we base it on his performance under Vladimir. Just to the point about Let Me's flash, he actually flashed in trying to kill Whippo.
Okay.
He got the feast and everything, but Whippo just survived and managed to step away from the fight, so that is why that flash is gone. But this bot lane turret, Uzi, full control like we see so often from him in playoffs, in the LPL. Like, he's been so insane in every single game he's played so far, and Now he's up 20 CS against Reckless. He takes a turret at 12 minutes. And he's not even completing his rage plate yet.
I mean, that's solo gold as well, but they're going in mid lane.
They are indeed. Winter's Bite comes out. Tower first blood secured by RNG. Actual first blood secured by Brox and Fnatic. They've got a 4-man stack in the mid lane, so they might get the tower at the cost of the Drake.
Yeah, really nice roam again by Hylissang in position to get that. They're trying to trade mid lane turret here.
Well, they're going to do their best. The minion wave is dying, though. It doesn't go down. MLXG could come up with that Ragnarok from the south. Decides not to throw that one down yet. Just hits him with the undertow and then starts to back away. RNG got the tower and the dragon at the cost of Xiaohu's life.
Fnatic knew there was no flash on Xiaohu's side, so by just giving up that bottom lane that was going to die eventually anyway, they could try and get at least first blood. And went over to Brox, and not exactly the member you want to see get it when you have a Yasuo, though, in that mid lane.
Definitely not, but RNG, back to the scene of the crime here. They stole the last blue buff. They're looking to keep this away, trying to take as many resources away from Fnatic. Luckily for Fnatic, there's no mana users in the solo lane, so it's not as big a deal. But it is still nice to kind of take any resources you can from your opponents.
Let's get the replay once again. It is, as you highlighted, Hylissang coming towards the mid lane, and Caps can set up very easily against the no flash from Xiaohu, and they see 2 members in the bot lane from RNG's side, so just a very easy kill.
Really well done, honestly. Pretty clean from Hylissang. And the concern becomes really, I think, Kog'Maw now. The Rage Blade is complete. He got solo gold for that turret. This was not a lane bully champion that was drafted to like a Caitlyn to take that early turret. They got that with a hyper-scaling Kog'Maw. He's up 20+ CS. He has the solo gold from that turret, and having that earlier Rage Blade completed is massive.
Yeah, and I think Reckless is going Essence Reaver on his side, which I don't like that much anymore. I think the Rage Blade build on Kai'Sa is just better because you want to get as much attack speed early game so you can involve your E and you get that stealth for yourself, which is so huge for her. The Q got nerfed already, so aiming purely for the early attack damage, I feel like just delays some of the impact that she can have.
Well, as it stands, Reckless is still maxing Q and definitely having some sort of delayed impact. Down 1,500 gold along with the rest of Fnatic. Down 30 CS nearly. And of course, they've lost control of that bottom lane. Already Caps has swapped. He's gone down bottom. We saw Reckless and Hilly defending top. So 1-3-1 somewhat enabled here for Fnatic.
And to be fair, the Essence Reaver does have strengths of its own. It does scale very well. Essence Reaver plus Pickaxe gets you that Q upgrade. You can then go back, for things like the Rage Blade, the Hurricane, the IE. And when you complete that full build, the amount of DPS you're putting out is incredible and can match and even at times surpass that of a Kog'Maw because it's not dependent on the W like the Kog'Maw is.
Yeah, very true. I mean, it's a good scaling build, just very expensive. Uzi is strong right now on just one item, and that's important because we need to talk about how RNG likes to play the game. It's not group 5 in mid and just A-ram it down every single time. It is actually a lot of 1-3-1 split push with Lepmi in one side lane, Xiaohu in the other one, and then what's important is that Uzi can hold the mid lane. It gets a bit easier now that he's playing with a Rage Blade against a not even completed Essence Reaver, and that's important for RNG.
Look at that damage.
Yeah, have fun, by the way.
Reckless down. Rage Blade max stacks plus W, just chunks it out.
And now Uzi gets lane control. He has a Tahm support that can ult to both side lanes. So RNG can now fully pressure the entire map because they can always send multiple members.
And that's why they're keeping, so much vision as well. Like you look at all across the map, jungle vision on the bottom side as well as the top side and in the river to track any potential collapse that could come in on Uzi. And as long as he is protected from those flanks, you cannot fight him straight up with the Tahm Kench behind him.
It's just a great move here. You push your side lanes, you go mid, get a bit of damage, and then you return to the side lanes, you push them out again, and you can keep doing this, and eventually you get down this mid lane turret. That opens up for a potential Rift Herald, and suddenly RNG, by just playing very smart, fairly slow, not just all-in aggression, can really get far ahead of Fnatic. Once again, it's mid lane being pushed, and now they can go towards top side.
It's insane. It's only 16 minutes in. It feels like with this amount of map control, RNG could even use the same philosophy to look for a Baron. Now, Caps runs into Xiaohu. Not going to find any follow-up. I was waiting to see if RNG were moving south, and that gold lead continues to creep up. It's 2,000. Defensive flash from Reckless there. Really, really didn't want to get caught further than that.
Yeah, a little bit surprised actually to see him flash set with the Braum in position in front of him. Seemed like a very, very respectful flash, perhaps a little bit too respectful. And mid lane turret's just going to go down straight up now. RNG could even go right back to the Rift Tail, grab that, and that would mean the third outer going down here for Fnatic. And while maybe you can fall this behind against some of the competition in the ULCS, RNG is so good. You know, they are on a higher level than really probably any of the Western teams right now, and that is a scary prospect to be this far down.
Yeah, it's typically not the greatest idea to go late game against RNG. They tend to have some very good carries on their side, and they have a composition, of course, with a good front line based on the Olaf and the Cho'Gath here. So RNG are playing the game exactly like they do back in the LPL. They are very happy with the fact that Uzi is so much stronger than Reckless at this point, and he just gets full control of that mid lane.
Oh man, it's just starting to get even more difficult. I know you guys were talking about the early game impact and how RNG sort of neutralized the Fnatic squad. But just to put it into comparison, Reckless's worst CSD at 15 this year was -15. In this game, it was -25. And that was a first pick Kai'Sa that was locked in. And unfortunately, just hasn't really gone the way we wanted. The Essence Reaver is now locked in, but it's going up against a Rageblade Hurricane Kog'Maw. It's going to be a long time before we can go toe-to-toe.
Yeah, and until you have at least the pickaxe and your upgraded Q, there's not really much going on here for the Kai'Sa. Not going to be looking for any fights. And honestly, at this point, for Fnatic, they are so behind the curve on those items that it's going to be quite some time before they can look for any real fights. And that's a scary prospect because you're going to be giving up Rift Herald, you're going to be giving up Dragons, and you know when the Baron is up in a couple more minutes, you have to worry about giving that up too.
And I've seen multiple times this RNG team set up vision properly around Baron and be ready to just either bait around it or turn for the fight, and they have a Cho'Gath. So there's not even that big chance of a Baron steal happening on the side of Fnatic. Everything is in RNG's favor. It's just a Yasuo pick that I'm looking at, saying this is now your win condition if you're Fnatic, and Caps is able to push in his lane.
Well, let's see what he can do. Follows up with a Q, manages to get the last breath as well. The shield comes up. And a Steel Tempest for the solo kill. Win condition enabled.
That was insane from Caps. So clean, getting the auto in before the last breath, playing that 1v1 perfectly, just straight up outplay Xiaohu.
Listen, all of the logic centers of my brain are saying RNG in the lead, RNG are looking good, RNG in control, but remember, locally Fnatic have played from behind. Locally, Fnatic have got some comfort in this scenario, and recently we've seen how even Kai'Sa's from behind can be game-changing. Uzi himself did it in the playoff run in the LPL, so there are options here for Fnatic if those magnificent moments continue to happen.
Yeah, here you mentioned a bunch of champion names. All I hear is Yasuo, Yasuo, Yasuo right now. And Caps, we highlighted this in Champ Select. He's done it so often in solo queue where he just hard carries games on this specific champion because, again, he's so mechanically gifted. As long as he can just focus on himself, on a pick where he can take over a side lane, then he can become so hard to deal with. And it's a huge transition because he was a player last year that didn't even know how to split push. He could just sit in the mid lane. He's learned all this split.
Now this was so nice. Here it is again from Caps, a 1v1 against Xiaohu, hitting every single Q. There's the knock-up into the auto before the last breath. Flash follow, finishes it off. That's just beautifully done, and every kill you get there buys more time.
Every kill you get there buys more time, and when Broxah and Caps double team to kill Xiaohu under the turret, while we were in that replay, gentlemen, they killed him again. I'm not sure if we'll get another replay of that or not.
Here's what happened. Broxah went in, popped the pillar.
There we go.
Then Yasuo jumped in against the no flash rise and said, smack, you're dead.
And that's 2 turrets. I mean, every kill buys so much more time. The turrets are buying so much more time and so much global gold there. The IE just got completed from a BF sword. The Yasuo is now massive. And
there is a lot of tension in this room because the RNG and Fnatic fans are spread throughout, and just these little moments and swings of power, all of a sudden Fnatic are looking good. They've closed that gold gap.
So let's talk about some of the ways RNG can now answer. We know they can't win 1v1 against the Yasuo, so I think they have 2 choices. One is you send down Ming plus another one in his belly, and you 3v1 try and kill Caps down that bottom lane. The other option is you just rush to the Baron after pushing mid. Caps is not running TP on his side. You have a Cho'Gath, and you have Uzi who can just destroy the Baron, and you force the team fight against Fnatic.
Exactly, and no matter how strong he is in that 1v1, there is still an exhaust on Ming. There's Tahm Kench to deny that target from the Yasuo, and that becomes very tough. And there you can see Xiaohu getting taken down in that dive, which resulted in another turret.
All right, so let's take a look. No vision north of the river for RNG. If they step forward, Brox and Caps can find themselves a target. Caps is going to hold onto the trigger for now as Reckless is making his way forward into the lane. They will get the flash from Ming, but nothing else.
So the very smart thing about this little move from Fnatic was in case RNG just wanted to push mid and rush straight to Baron, they would have walked into Caps and Broxa, but RNG, they knew, okay, we don't see these players at the moment, we have to just stay back, and Leppy's now jumping Caps.
Let's see what sort of can happen. The silence comes up. Very good blade, but Caps will still get run down as the unstoppable Ragnarok MXG's chasing him. Finally gonna slice and dice his way out, but Caps goes down.
And there we get multiple members from RNG jumping onto him. Ming coming in with that ulti. 4 members of Fnatic alive to try and defend. RNG not starting the Baron yet. Trying to trap them maybe.
Yeah, and they have the option to just push top. I mean, they still have the Rift Herald, so they're just going to drop the Rift Herald and look to push an inner turret here. But Fnatic with a pretty nice response, pushing mid, knocking down that mid outer, so at least able to get a turret. And Caps bought a lot of time there without even having his flash available.
Yeah.
That dash over the wall was so sick, and a lot of nice sidesteps there, but just not enough to get him away. Still very well played.
Oh man, it just continues to build. The Rift Herald will get taken out now by Reckless. He uses that Icathian Rain, making his way towards those second items, by the way. Essence Reaver, Pickaxe, as well as the Shard. 2 item spikes slowly creeping in, and Azel, we're going to get some answers for Bwipo's build. He's got himself that needlessly large rod, got himself a second one, and the Void Staff. So he's going to go that sort of death cap route.
Yeah, man, he's looking very strong. You have to look at Broxa here as well. When you're sitting, on this Olaf versus the Trundle at this point in the game, I certainly favor the Trundle very heavily. The Zeke's is already completed. Could be building towards, something like a Knight's Vow or maybe just an adaptive helm against all this magic damage. But that is going to add a significant amount of team fight pressure. With the challenging smite plus your ultimate plus Zeke's being channeled, that is really, really strong.
Also looking back then at Reckless, and there's this Reaver. Currently upgraded his Q because above 100 AD. No upgrade yet on his E, so no stealth. He's only at 84% attack speed right now. Still needs to get up to 100% on this Kai'Sa, so he's still waiting a little bit, but the damage will get there eventually.
Yeah.
And as long as Fnatic do not lose the Baron, they should be able to stop the bleeding.
Yeah, and honestly, they've closed the gold gap a little bit here, thanks largely in part to Caps and is playing the side lane with Broxa. And we're going to see Reckless building towards a Rage Blade now, which will give him that E upgrade. And then when he eventually gets to an IE, his damage is going to be insane. But you still do see Uzi, kind of outpacing him as far as itemization. And despite some things going bad for RNG, when IE is complete for Uzi, the damage output there will be absurd.
Well, it is complete now. So those 3 items are there. And of course, for Caps, he's the next sort of franchise player for Fnatic. There's a lot of information on him on that Eyes on MSI episode. But when Fnatic picked him up a while ago, this is what Fnatic were hoping to see. The rebuild of Fnatic, trying to bring them back to the international stage, trying to get them back to winning ways. And they finally done it after 2 years. They won Spring, and they're doing okay against RNG, but they still have a gigantic hurdle ahead of them.
And nothing should stop RNG from controlling mid with this insane power spike on Uzi, except for Caps leaving his side lane and walking to mid lane. It's what happened the last few minutes. So because Caps managed to snowball so quickly against Xiaohu, it's actually opened up now for him to become the biggest team player, because he's stopping mid lane control from happening, and therefore the Baron, it's a little bit harder for RNG to rush it down.
Definitely isn't. Oh, 1v1 perhaps.
Well, let's take a look. Escape from Xiaohu.
Everyone wants to 1v1 Xiaohu.
Yeah, apparently.
But not going to happen there for Bwipo. Still nicely done. But you have to talk about, while the fact that Uzi has an incredible amount of damage in this build, he had a lot of the supportive things banned away from him. There's no mid lane Karma or Morgana. There's no shielding coming out from a Lulu. So he is still somewhat vulnerable if he gets caught. But look at Caps going forward.
Whoa! Caps chunks out 60% of MLXG's damage with a Phantom Dancer IE. Now that's the Smite user that's forced away. How spicy are Fnatic feeling?
Well, once again, it's Caps around the mid lane because he knows he doesn't need to do a lot more individually up in that top lane. He just keeps controlling Fnatic's middle of the map, and it just buys more time for Reckless to try and get enough items to actually deal damage.
You've also got to say, with Bwipo already having his Death Cap, his Void Stuff, his 3 items completed on top of that with that Shurelya's, going to Baron now it becomes very risky for RNG because you're grouping up and the damage amp coming out of that can be absolutely terrifying.
Yes. And talking about damage amp, Deathcat picked up there. So Bwipo continues to scale. Obviously, Caps continues to scale. 26 minutes in, the gold lead is irrelevant. It doesn't mean a thing. And then it just brings us back, gentlemen, to what you both said in Picks and Bans. Execution, execution, execution.
Also the very easy caller caster point to make every time.
Yeah.
Execution, that's
Don't tell me our secrets, Marcus. This is hard. They pay us to do it.
Gentlemen. Well, let's take a look. Caps is leading the fray, sweeping Blade once and twice. Looking for the Tempest. And the key has not been unlocked yet. But Caps for themselves another BF sword, and everybody in RNG is terrified of it.
I mean, he's looking like he's working towards that Bloodthirster. I'm a little bit surprised that he's not going for a QSS when you are playing up against Xiao, who that lockdown from Ryze can be so devastating to Yasuo in a team fight. Does have a cleanse, but we'll see.
Maybe not enough.
Yeah.
We get to see if it actually ends up hurting him in some of these fights. Fnatic will get a Cloud Drake.
Okay, when are we going to fight again? All right, let's put some expectations on this. RNG have no longer got control of mid, which means they can't set up for the Baron. Does that mean Fnatic kind of want to or not?
I mean, I think RNG should still be able to get control of that mid lane. When they see Caps in that side lane, when he's pushing out the lane, like, if you look at the minimap now, it's a giant wave from RNG pushing down. So when Caps goes to take that wave, Uzi can hard commit to the mid lane, and that opens up for the river at least, and RNG can try and force a fight. The problem is, do they want to take one near the Baron area when, as Azael highlighted before, there's a fairly fit Vladimir now? Do you want to stand as a group against a Yasuo ulti? Like, it can actually get pretty difficult for RNG to play the 5-on-5 in the small areas.
It does get really risky when both teams are playing so well around vision, not being caught off guard. I think Fnatic is happy to continue scaling up, is happy to continue playing side lanes and trying to avoid this team fight until perhaps the Yasuo is even at a stronger point, until Reckless has caught up a little bit more on itemization, at least has his Rage Blade.
Yeah, I think also eventually a GA comes in from Caps' side, and that is really big because it allows you to play even more aggressive.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem for Fnatic now. If a fight did break out and Caps gets caught instantly and he just dies, that is currently the strongest player on the team, and suddenly we're then mainly looking at Whippo on the Vladimir, and he's currently just been farming.
Of course, the one thing that we haven't seen, because we've not seen gigantic team fights, that wind wall and that unbreakable wall can do wonders against a Kog'Maw. He's got the Hurricane, he's got multiple bolts that are going to spit out. When we eventually get to those team fights, let's see the timing on those abilities and how game-changing they can be. Because RNG, they've got mid, they've pushed it down. I'm looking at the vision. They've got some shallow wards in Fnatic's territory, but they're pushing back to clear it all out.
And we can see Xiao still down on the bottom side of the map. He does have his teleport available if anything were to start, but trying to continue keeping this pressure up. And we have to remember that Caps does not have a teleport, so while he wants to play side lanes, it can become more difficult, because if you show yourself here, that could trigger RNG to go to the Baron.
That's the thing, Caps needs to kill Xiao Hu, so he can't just
him.
TP to a Baron itself. Interesting enough, the Ryze has actually gone for Banshees in this game. You would automatically think, well, you need to go Hourglass because you're against a bunch of physical damage, especially the Yasuo. I think Xiao Hu is saying if he stays far enough back when the fight starts, he doesn't get instantly CC'd by something because of the Banshee, and then he will not be the target for the Yasuo ult. But I'm missing an Hourglass at this point.
If it works exactly that way,
if it works
that the
exactly like that, great.
Negates the insta-engage.
Oh, but not having more armor here, this is tricky for him. I mean, he's of course 1v1ing the Vladimir, so there will be some value from the MR.
Exactly. I mean, Whippo is the one with teleport here, right? So he is going to be the one having to answer in bottom lane. The Bloodthirster completed for Caps is going to give him a bit more safety, with that Bloodthirster shield in the team fights. And in the 1v1, it becomes incredibly hard to kind of out-damage that healing that is coming through. But I think it makes a lot of sense to have Caps top side of the map with that cleanse, have Whippo in the bottom side, and try to play the map that way.
Look at Reckless, by the way. He's picked up his Infinity Edge, and this arm race continues to escalate. The Baron is very obviously a big deal. With 3 Cloud Drakes having been killed, the next will be a Mountain. That's a little bit juicier to fight for in the later stages of the game.
Yeah, seeing him go for the IE there instead of an extra dagger, he still doesn't have the E evolved. He will get it with one more dagger or another level up. Yeah. But certainly delaying that very, very far. And Caps looks like he wants this.
Oh, the wind wall comes down, so Uzi's damage not going to come out. Where's the Tempest? Flash away from once again, just on Ming. Uzi dancing on the edge of danger.
But RNG are now the ones just buying time and stopping Fnatic from rushing down at Baron. And that allows Xiao Hu now to get this bot lane turret. So everything that before was Fnatic having to stop RNG from getting an early objective is now actually RNG doing the same and it allows them to have this rise with the Banshee split push against Whippo.
Well, it just continues to make me ask more questions. I've never
This
seen...
has been a very insane game
never
despite
seen
so few kills.
a Yasuo game go so slowly.
2 minutes.
Normally it's one way or the other. Right, engage is going to be on MLXG. He flashes over. Insta-flash from Caps. That's one. Letme's going to be the next target, but the top tower not even available, and the rest of RNG have responded.
Jungler's down, and the flashes off the Cho'Gath. So this becomes so hard for them to steal, but Caps is just going to pick it up.
Oh, Caps just gets eaten alive. The rest of Fnatic now are inside the pit. Hemo Plague lands onto 3 for Whippo, but Baron is hammering away. The gigantic heal will bring Whippo back to full HP, but Xiaohu's on the inhibitor turret.
Yeah, they didn't actually handle that right. Caps got such a good pick, but then he went to stop the blast cone, so Letme wouldn't be able to blast cone in and feast the Baron, but he gives up his life to do it, meaning they lose the inhibitor turret on the bottom side. RNG is the one who has priority on Baron now.
And they're going at least around it. They can just start it here because Caps is dead for another 30 seconds. He's the only player they have to be afraid of, and they have the Cho'Gath and, of course, Uzi ready to kill it. So this should be RNG getting Baron, and they also got bot lane in it, but they're not starting it. They're actually playing it just super, super slow.
I would have thought they'd at least try to get the TP out of Whippo.
They were just waiting for Ming. They're waiting for Ming with ult. That's fine. Now they can do it.
It's theirs. Fnatic has base. They're not even going to check it. So this is just a conceded Baron here, 32 minutes in. Big advantage going over to RNG.
I think right before there, Caps saw that MLXG, for some weird reason, has gone Black Cleaver in this game. Instead of just rushing a Randuin's, which is such a fantastic item against a Yasuo, just going full tank as fast as possible. So he's actually squishy. That's why Caps can jump in and effectively kill him in 2 seconds. But as you said before here, Zale, the fact that he then is not able to actually just run back to his team or doesn't decide to do it, means that Uzi, the very fed AD carry who we've been highlighting all game long, just kills him.
It was tunneling way too much on the blast cone. He knows, okay, Jungler's dead, Feast is the only way to steal it, his flash is down, how does he get in? It's the blast cone. I'll go over there, I'll knock that down, but in doing so, gives up his life, and that means they can't get the Baron.
And how much more? Baron buff secured by RNG, they extend that gold lead. Itemization continues to come in. Hourglass is now picked up for Xiaohu to complement the Banshee's Veil. Randuin's putting in the top lane, more of Mortius for Uzi, and yes, Fnatic get a Constellation Dragon, which may help later, but they have to fend off a Baron-empowered siege.
Let's see what happens around mid, because the RNG is setting up their own little trap.
All right, MLXG comes out. The undertow falls a little short. Killer Instinct is available. In goes Hilly. Gets a knock up. MLXG is already down. He's got no enough armor or hit points. Letme's the next target. He's being melted by Reckless and Caps taken out. All of a sudden, RNG with Baron, they lose 2 members.
The one positive for Fnatic was all the outer turrets were already dead, so they had a lot of room to move and just look for a fight. They didn't have to sit back and defend a siege. They could actually just force and engage, and it was RNG setting up in that little brush. That's a Fnatic tactic. You can't do that against them.
Didn't work out. All right, Banshee's Veil popped by Xiaohu. That was the W of Reckless that connected into the Baron team. That's the 4th tower of the game for Fnatic. They're now setting their sights with inhibitor mid. 25 seconds for Letme, 8 seconds for MLXG. The inhibitor should fall, and Fnatic will once again even this game out.
Yeah, very well done. You know, denying really anything to be gotten there from RNG. They still have a minute 20 on the buff, but Fnatic camping out a brush here again. We'll see if RNG makes a mistake to check this.
Well, MXG's got that Randuin's, but he's not tanky enough to survive for very long.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the power of the Trundle, right? He's not built full tank, and then Trundle ulting you on top of that, but RNG, maybe looking for this fight, they're TPing in.
Uzi with the spider senses, he manages to interrupt the living artillery. Brox is on the front line, forced to run for his life. Devour from Ming by so much time. Uzi is taken out. That's the most fed member. Whippo follows immediately thereafter. Fnatic get caught out. Killer Instinct goes down for Reckless before he's shut down. That might just be game.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be game here. It's only 2 members alive, and it's the support and the jungler. The bottom inhibitor is open.
Oh, he's going to stop the recall.
He is indeed. Feral scream for the silence. Quiet the Fnatic fans.
Fnatic all in to try and kill Uzi, but there was a Tahm Kench right next to him, and the moment Uzi popped out of that belly, he turned around and he just destroys Fnatic.
This was an insane game, back and forth, and the living artillery that stopped Fnatic's backs. That's what turned this game around. RNG are waiting for the minions to pour into the base. The Nexus turrets are falling. The Nexus is killed, and RNG take down Fnatic.
What a crazy game there. As you said, almost all decided by Fnatic, deciding to camp that brush, getting spotted out. RNG makes the immediate collapse. TP comes in. They win the one team fight they needed, but Fnatic made them work for it. The Yasuo was very impressive from Caps, and it just never really all came together.
If we look at it, like, Caps and Broxah were the only two members really finding success. If we look at them getting kills, and then Hylissang with the early roams being very successful. But on the side of RNG, they had this fed AD carry. They were just sitting ready to get a 5-on-5 team fight, and he needed one towards the end.
And they were dominating even in the 2v2. Uzi and Ming in the straight up 2v2 took down that bottom turret so ridiculously fast, got big CS advantages, and Uzi was just much more effective than Rekkles in this first game. Rekkles certainly going for a more atypical build, skips the Rage Blade completely in this game, and wasn't really able to make it work out.
Definitely looked like a player, of course, who's not been able to play this on the competitive stage just yet, because it was disabled in the European playoffs. Very important for RNG, though. First game they played, they arrived yesterday. They play the last game of the day now. If you lose that first one, right, it's 5-6 hours with jet lag getting ready for the next one.
And what a way to win as well. Tempered, controlled, even in the face of this Yasuo that could 1v1 absolutely anybody. RNG did not expose more weaknesses than they needed to. Xiaohu got killed twice, and then he didn't get killed again in that side lane.
You can see just how serious RNG looks, though. They are focused on the next games. They got this win, but it was by no means a dominating win. It was by no means one-sided affair. So they are focused on improving, focused on the future competition.
Focused on the future competition. That is King Zone Dragon X at the end of the day. Way, way, way later. Before that, though, and for more on how RNG won this game, let's head to the State Farm Analyst Desk.
Thank you very much. Quick shot. I mean, what an ending to that game. Kind of seemingly out of nowhere as Fnatic put up such a great fight throughout the entirety of that game, being down only a couple thousand, taking a few rightful stabs back to wrestle control away from RNG, but ultimately it falls to the LPL squad, Jat.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed with the way the game ended because it was a very back and forth game. It had been very strategic up until the Baron stuff. You think Fnatic is in a good position because they'd just taken the inhibitor, and then losing a fight still on RNG's side to have it end. I feel like there was more game to be played.
There should have been, right? And we'll work our way back through the
game
as it happened. But before we do so, we're going to take another look at the final team fight, our first winning team fight of the MSI group stage, brought to you by Acer Predator.
So for me, this fight, all eyes are on Uzi, and initially at this point, I'm like, okay, Fnatic, they've got him, but then Ming gobbles him up, puts him over the wall, and there's just no follow-up of all of the damage.
So for me, I feel like I was watching Cats
had a really bad fight.
When you're playing against a Cogmore, his goal is to just kill whoever's in front of him, right? And at this point in the game, he just melts through anything. A good, well-placed wind wall will just deny all of his damage. And Caps' focus was, I'm going to get on to the Cogmore rather than I'm just going to kill the front line. And I feel like his decision-making at the end, in that choke point against the Tahm Kench, who then saved the AD carry, just a lot of small factors came together that made it really difficult for him to pull off a successful team fight.
And ultimately, we never really got to see a lot of the cool depth and layers that Fnatic's composition really could set up against a Kog'Maw, especially in a choke point like that. Having the Braum, having the Yasuo win wall, it completely changes the W timings that you're playing around.
Right.
But
I mean, speaking of team compositions, right, at the top of the day, we talked about the possibility of seeing the likes of Karmas and Morganas in the mid lane. Well, those hit the ban table this time around. We're left with a matchup, Ryze versus Yasuo. Game one, Fnatic pulls this out. Vidius, talk to me, because play style-wise, how does this fit in with the way that Fnatic has played up to this point of the season?
Yeah, so during the regular season, Fnatic would typically draft this scaling style of comp. And you talked a lot about it when we were coming into today's games. And it was just, this is a very similar style. With Yasuo, he's all about scaling. 2 items, 3 items. In a side lane, that's where he really shines, especially against the 1-3-1 that RNG had drafted for themselves. And when you have Vladimir and a Yasuo in a side lane, these two are always going to win. So Fnatic's whole goal was, we don't mind falling behind a little bit in the early game as long as we don't suffer too much, that we can then set up for these side lanes later on.
I actually thought it was super dangerous for Fnatic to draft like this because they didn't have tempo anywhere on the map. MLXG in the jungle over the Trundle, all 3 lanes behind in tempo as well. The fact that they got to gold parity was a huge accomplishment.
But I think
in that game.
I think the reason for that was because Olaf has no lanes to gank. You cannot gank the Yasuo because Wimble completely denies his engage. Trying to gank Vladimir is almost impossible because of his pool. And bot lane, MLXG didn't decide to go for, and I think diving a Braum overall is just very dangerous in entirety. So I felt like they could never use that tempo advantage.
You can gank the Yasuo with Predator. You just run and hit him.
Right. You also have a Tom pinch. I just feel like there was a lot of opportunities where RNG also didn't utilize the composition to create picks. They got super stalled out in the mid game, and Caps just ran rampant.
And let's talk about, though, the danger of falling into a deficit, you know, like Fnatic was comfortable doing domestically, but here now against the top team from the LPL. CS differentials. What Uzi was doing to the likes of Reckless in the bot lane, I mean, it's not like Reckless was necessarily CSing poorly, but he averages up next to 9 CS in his region, and he was down 25 at 15 minutes here.
Now, to be fair to Reckless, it was a Kai'Sa matchup versus that type of Kog'Maw lane. There was a lot of pressure, a lot of resources, so much control around the bot side of the map for RNG. So I don't 100% really blame Reckless there. I think this is more showcasing how incredible Uzi is and how good RNG are mitigating or putting resources into him, funneling that farm, finding the free lanes, and protecting him while he picks up those gold leads.
And that said, while the Kog'Maw is the focus of the RNG composition, the Kai'Sa not necessarily the focus of the Fnatic composition, especially with the way that Caps was piloting this Yasuo to perfection through the mid game.
Exactly that. This is what we wanted to see from Fnatic, which is very much that in a side lane, Yasuo is kind of unstoppable, especially with the introduction to Conqueror. He is very, very strong. And the moment he hit 2 items, they were just looking to build these advantages in the side lane. But I feel like the Fnatic, they missed a couple of crucial steps later on into the game that made it difficult for Yasuo to properly utilize his split pushing press, because they never even took the top tier 1. If they had just gained better vision control towards the bot side of the map, allowed him to create the pressure to make it difficult for the Rise to TP in, that gave Fnatic more options to control the Baron and utilize the split pushing Yasuo.
There was a peculiar stall out, right? Once we started to see the rise in the split push position and Caps unable to match that, there did seem to be some difficulty in Fnatic in terms of how should we push this game forward. This was their best attempt at it here.
And that's when they're making a play kind of around topside with Baron. This is the big decider, though, not getting the blast cone and being
now he's
trapped.
stuck.
Because you can understand why he's going for the blast cone. It prevents the Cho'Gath from getting the feast. And then here it's almost like RNG gave it all back, because it's a 4v4 where Fnatic still has time for setup, which is, I think, the big difference between this fight and the fight where Fnatic lost the game, was the setup of having the Braum and Trundle in front of the Yasuo to actually have the proper fight. Such a weird game, and I'm still disappointed in the ending, because
well, you're left
Fnatic
unsatisfied
so
almost because you feel like it ended in such a fashion that it shouldn't.
Well, maybe
right?
they're left unsatisfied.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. I'm not going to speak. I shouldn't speak for everybody.
Are you not worried that RNG had tempo in all 3 lanes and jungle, and then was it gold parity with Fnatic 35 minutes in?
Okay, no, absolutely, I am worried about that, but RNG have been known to have kind of these weird mid-games, especially when they do have someone like Letme, because Letme is not as confident. Yeah, RNG have the capabilities to play a 1-3-1. They do like to use Letme and Xiaohu in side lanes, but their big 1-3-1 top laner has always been Zatai. And so the fact that they didn't bring Zatai, I kind of figured out that they would fall back. Like, there's a reason why Letme got subbed out mid-split and hasn't been kind of their primary starting top laner for a long time. Now, the thing is that RNG, jet lag, you know, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but they went to comfort picks, whereas I felt like Fnatic really prepped this game for RNG. It felt like they had a really good read. We normally don't see a 1-3-1 from Fnatic. They pulled it out. I actually think it was a great strategy to try to catch RNG off guard.
Well, Fnatic pulled out some interesting stuff here in Game 1. Unfortunately, don't walk away with the victory as RNG will pick up the first win of the group stages. Now, after the break, Flash Wolves and Evos Esports continue their MSI run right after the interview with Xiaohu. Don't go anywhere.
I mean, that's solo gold as well, but they're going in mid lane.
They are indeed. Winter's Bite comes out. Tower first blood secured by RNG. Actual first blood.
Fnatic, and Caps is able to push in his lane.
Well, let's see what he can do. Follows up with a Q, manages to get the last breath as well. A shield comes out from and a steal Tempest for the solo kill. Yasuo game goes so slowly. No moves one way or the other. Right, engage is going to be on MLXG. He flashes over. Insta flash from Caps. The Undertow falls a little short. Kill Instinct is available. In goes Hilly. Gets a knock up. MLXG is already down. He's got enough armor or hit points. Lemney's the next target. He's being melted by Reckless and Caps taken out. Uzi with the spider senses. He manages to interrupt the living artillery. Bruxus on the front line, forced to run for his life. Devour from Ming by so much time. Bruxus is taken out. That's the most fed member. The Nexus turrets are falling. The Nexus is killed, and RNG take down Fnatic.